Welcome back to Two Homers and a Realist. We are in the midst of the postseason, transforming into the off season. I'm Steve.
Jay.
Lucas.
Connor.
And we'd like to shout out to Tobacco Exchange and make sure that we get recognition to them. They were such a great sponsor throughout the entire season. 3 great locations throughout the metro area: Oklahoma City, Moore, our home base, and Edmond. Lucas, do you have the info on the latest cigars they gave us?
Nope.
Well, we're have to get that to you later. We're smoking our own thing tonight. They supplied us with great cigars throughout the season, great pricing, great staff. Go out, check them out if you're just cigar curious. They're your guys to hook up with. So, the college football season's over for 2024.
Thank God.
The national champion has been crowned. Ohio State, gross. At least it's not Texas. I don't know. There's so much to say. What are you guys' thoughts in recap?
I find I don't know if it brings something to the playoffs, saying that it worked, that the 7 versus 8 is made it to the national championship, or if it shows that, I don't know, maybe we just been doing it wrong the whole time. I don't know.
Well, I don't think so, because it's a 7 versus 8 with an asterisk, right?
Yeah, but Ohio State really, that loss to Michigan traditionally would have helped them out.
Well, sure, when it's 2 teams or 4 teams.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, everyone knew they were better than Arizona State. Everyone knew they were better than Boise State. Everyone knew they're better than SMU. Everyone knew they were better than Clemson. Most likely they're going to win those games 7, 8 times out of 10. So it's not like a real 7 versus 8, in my opinion. You had a couple teams vying in the top 4, and this was a season with a lot of equality at the top. Like, it's hard to differentiate. There was no truly elite team or teams to say these guys are head and shoulders above the rest. That is when I think it would ruin it. If you had the perennial Alabama of years past and Clemson of years past and even Georgia, and they're getting beat early in an upset, then you're saying, God, I don't know how I feel about this thing. But this year, I think it worked out great as far as the bracket goes.
Yeah, I think it played out. I mean, as expected, and maybe as expected is I think we got some pretty good quality football in the last 2 rounds for sure. Semifinals were good games. National championship was a little flat, in my opinion. It got a little interesting there at the end. But overall, like I can't say I was just sitting there being like, well, I wish this other team was in it, or I wasn't sitting there saying I wish Penn State was in this game. As interesting as that may have been with a rematch, but I thought about it the other night we were watching the game. It's crazy we were watching college football into mid-January, mid to late January-ish, and I enjoy that. It was fun. It sucked we weren't there, but it's fun to have the game around and games on. So I don't know. I'm not disappointed with the playoff experience at all, honestly.
Man, I don't think Jay was talking bad about it. I think he was saying it worked like it was supposed to, because you had a team that was really good that would have never made the playoff in a 14 playoff with those 2 losses. They lost at Oregon, and then they lost at home to Michigan and didn't get to play in the conference championship game. And this year they wouldn't have been a top 4 team with that record.
Oh, so you're saying it did work the way it's supposed to?
Yeah, okay. What he said, yeah. Because you would have had an undefeated Oregon in there. You would have had an SEC champion Georgia in there.
Mm-hmm.
You would have probably had Texas there. Oregon. Maybe, Oregon, Georgia, Texas.
And then Clemson.
And I don't know if you had.
It'd been a weird
Clemson
year.
would not have been in there in previous years. No
Yeah.
chance. They had 3 losses. No chance.
It would have been.
Yeah.
It would probably been Boise.
They had 3 losses.
It's probably been the at-large Boise getting it.
Yeah,
I'd imagine.
it might have been.
Maybe.
There'd been
Maybe.
it'd been the one year to
Arizona
argue
State.
for.
It would have been about argument between Arizona State and Boise.
So, I mean, getting Ohio State in there, it felt more NFL-ish because they got hot at the right time.
Right.
They lost their last game to Michigan, and they get in the playoffs and rattle off. They beat Tennessee, they beat Oregon, and they got to face Notre Dame. So,
And they got to avenge a loss
Yep.
That's a-
they got
that's a
the
big
Avenger
deal.
loss,
They beat
and
Texas.
they got their home game also.
And they won 4 straight games after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So it felt more like, almost like, the year the Giants beat the Patriots, just because the Giants weren't an amazing team throughout the season, but they got hot at the right time and
Yeah.
ran through the playoffs.
I felt better about it than that. I'm bitter on that one still because the Giants did not deserve to win that game, did not deserve to be Super Bowl champions that year.
I would have rather
Ohio
seen
State
an undefeated
does.
New England.
New England.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it when a big time upset happens unless it's a team that I want to win the upset.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I thought it had an NFL type of feel to it.
But
was
and it
good.
wasn't an easy run.
No,
like I
it
said.
wasn't an easy.
No,
run.
that's a
The,
great. It
the
was a
teams
great.
they
run,
faced,
honestly.
having to beat Texas and Oregon,
Yeah.
and then face Notre Dame.
It was not the criticism we would have leveled against Texas, and they would have said sour grapes, but I think it would have been legit that they had a very easy run
Yeah.
right in front of them, and they just squandered it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the first
Yeah, I
good team
think
they
they'll
played.
definitely. We've talked about it before, but
I think they're gonna
Oregon
reseed.
was screwed. You know, it is what it is. I guess
a lot of teams were
if you're
screwed.
that good though, I guess just go win your game. But
Yeah, still, and that
the paths they'll definitely have to look at the path to.
it really sounds like in 2025 they're going to look at that seeding and say we're not doing this again. And this was a great year to blow that up because it exposed it for the problem that it is. And then I think in future years it's going to be 16 teams and 26 and on, and then it's just a matter of do we not do 2 weeks of 2 weeks of home field, or do we go to a different venue?
It'll be interesting too, and maybe it was just by chance that all 4 teams with the bye lost. But
Yeah.
moving forward, I mean, if it happens again next year,
Well-
it might be something they have to look at as well.
Well, 2 of them were. Well, it won't happen again. I don't think because there'll be 16 teams. There won't be any buys. But
No, next year.
next year, yeah,
Yeah.
well, but that'd be the last year of the buys. But I
That's
think
crazy.
it's because
I
2 of them sucked. 2 of them are
Yeah.
Boise State and Arizona State.
I mean, Arizona State could have beat Texas. With the ball
As
fouls.
bad as they were.
Um, I always wanted 8, and even when they went from 2 to 4, I've always said 8 was the right number. You have no buys. You get the first round, everybody plays.
The home
You get
field.
the home field, and then you do the smaller bowl and the semifinal championship.
Mhm.
I think 12's too many. I don't think you're ever going to have the 10, 11, 12 win more than likely.
It's surprising they skipped the 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can't
Mhm.
go backwards now.
Right.
No,
I think
you
they
can't,
could have
no.
That's
tried the 8 and then be like, we need to bump this to
No, it's
12.
it's TV.
I wish
Like,
it would have gone just to 8 first.
Yep.
Because then there might have been a little bit of clamoring for 12, but without having the top four get a bye, and if you
Right.
had Oregon playing at home week 1, you had well, if you didn't do the stupid thing that they did this year with Arizona State, you probably had Oregon, Georgia. Who else? Texas may have got.
Texas.
Texas was probably top 14.
Yeah.
And then who
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. No, Penn State was ranked higher than Notre Dame. But Notre Dame only had the 1 loss, right?
Yeah. So it'd been
So
between the 2 of them.
and I guarantee you those teams would love to have hosted a first game of the playoffs at home.
Yeah, and Notre Dame got to, but yeah.
Texas did too.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've always been an 8 is enough. I thought it was the right number. When I look back historically, never does a 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th team have any business, a true 9, 10, or 11, any business claiming they have a right for the chance at the title. And I'm fearful, and maybe the source of bleak hope is if we get a world where some fluky thing happens and the 11 seed wins the national championship, then maybe they say, wait a second. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to go to 16. Money's going to talk. The only way it goes back to a smaller number is if the league shrinks. So if they go to some kind of smaller elite league, then
Or viewership.
well, it could be our viewership, but I think it's going to have to be driven by fewer teams. And then you say, okay, of 64 teams, we're going to choose the top 8 or something like that. But it's 134 teams in football
Yeah, if they
and
did.
that many conferences.
They
I
did
just don't think
4
they'll do it.
12-team conferences. You had 48 teams. You could easily go to 18.
Yeah, it'd work so well. It worked great.
I just think if it goes to 16, you've got to have some pretty strict parameters on. I mean, you could have chosen 12 to 14 teams in the Power Four conferences that you could say, you know, be a fun playoff to have these
Yeah, Alabama,
12 or
Ole
so.
Miss,
South Carolina.
those are three that got talked about a lot.
Yeah,
And then
and,
all of them lost the bowl game.
yeah, yeah, and
The
I'm
Ole Miss.
like Miami would have been a fun one.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah.
who did Arizona State play in the Big 12 championship? Iowa State. Arguably, like if you're going to consider the Big
Yeah.
Four, and you could fill up that 16 teams with, you know, it'd be fun to have 4 teams from each of the Power Four, and just like we've always said, go to the NIT version for the other teams.
for the others, yeah.
So
I think that one thing that they need to be careful about, and I don't know if anybody's thoughtful enough to be careful here, or anybody's in control to be careful, but the product delusion is real. And if you dilute the regular season, it could really screw up the sport. So ideally, in a playoff world, that opens up opportunities to play teams because you're not afraid of a loss. And the quality loss or a quality win is going to be wonderful. Plus, you get everything that goes with a gigantic matchup early in the season of a non-conference team. But if you're looking at it saying, we're in a 16-team playoff, we're going to have to win 4 straight games against really tough opponents, I can't get beat up that much. We can't schedule an OU Michigan in week 2.
Texas, Ohio State.
Texas and Ohio State. We can't afford to do that. We're going to injuries, wear and tear in general, just having to show up everything we've got. Just like it's a long
Plus,
season at that
it has
point.
yet to be proven that good losses hold any water.
well, that's why subjective rankings are. I mean, it's so, I guess, messed up. Like I saw a really good model of even the 12 team where it had the Power Four, and it did do exactly what I said. It took the top, I think, took like the top 3 from the Power Four and did basically like NFL divisions do, and ranked them that way, and had a version of a wild card. I think if you had some sort of like formalized standings that aren't left up to quality losses and stuff like that, and you're playing these games out of conference to go make your overall record better. Let's just say you're tie breaking and you've had
The
this
only
win.
strange difference there is the conference championship game,
Mm-hmm.
because it is meaningful
Mhm.
to play in that game and to win that game.
Mm-hmm. And
But is it beneficial at all
I
to
mean,
be in that game?
arguably, Ohio State benefited by setting it out.
Exactly, which is
So,
exactly what we were
You
saying.
got to be
all
real
season
careful
could
about
happen.
that.
But it didn't hurt Georgia or Texas.
But they didn't win.
It would have hurt Georgia if they would have lost. Georgia would have been a
Well, not just that.
They still
In terms of their playoffs, how they did in the playoff,
Gotcha.
arguably it hurt both of them.
Right.
I mean, didn't their quarterback get hurt in the championship game? He did.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
and Notre Dame's on the other side of that.
Mhm.
Not having
They
to
don't
play.
have to.
Yeah, and that's not good. That needs to change. That's the one thing that I like about Notre Dame not winning. I don't want a team that gets that sort of little.
Preference.
We've figured out a way to circumvent the system.
Yeah.
And some years it's going to hurt them. Some years it's going to smack them down really hard. This year happened to work out real well for them. But I just don't like that idea that they have a different path, such
I mean,
a
they
different
have
path.
since they signed the BCS contract back.
I know.
in early 2000s.
I know.
It's like,
It's problem.
If they had this record or this number of losses, whatever they got in, it was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. And so there's that. And the other thing I don't want them to do, which is NFL like, I don't like the idea of really uniform divisions as if those divisions are always going to be the same, because they're not.
Yeah.
That is problematic. So you get a team that barely has a winning record, but they won the division, and all of a sudden they're the same as some other team either gets left out or they're in a really tough spot just because even though they're really good, they were third in the division.
But we have that now also,
Somewhat, but not.
because you could be a poor team.
Well, yeah, absolutely, we have it. Yeah, I mean, any time that you've got the automatic qualifiers, that's a problem. Yeah, of any dimension, and it could just get worse if you get too structured.
I mean, it usually doesn't end up like that.
No,
Arizona State got their bye.
I mean,
Absolutely.
the worst
that's
one,
why Boise State got in it.
the worst one in recent times was the Connecticut, when OU played Connecticut in the Fiesta,
Right.
because they were 7-5, 7-6 or something.
No, they only had 2 or 3 losses.
No, I think they had like 7 wins.
No, they were like,
No,
they were pretty legit.
Yeah,
They were like 9.
Because I mean, as
Yeah,
an
they had a
at-large
good
bid,
record.
you have to like, I'm sure. Oh, I'll have to go back.
I think they're,
I don't
I think
think
they
so.
were 9-3, or they played in a championship game,
Yeah, and they won.
so they'd be 10.
They
10
beat
They were
South,
the
they
Big
beat
East
South
champions.
Florida. They
Yeah,
beat South
I'm
Florida.
not. I'm gonna
Or 10
say. I'm gonna say it was
10
no
and
more than
3.
8 wins.
I think they were 9.
Well,
think they-
10-3.
Nowhere. Nowhere.
Yeah,
They
10
did not have
10
10.
after the conference championship.
That seems right to me. I can't remember.
They were like 7-5.
Well, we'll look it up as he's looking that up.
He's actually close.
Oh no, what is it?
8-4.
8-4. Do they didn't play in the championship?
So they were 9-4. Championship.
Has us listed at 11-2.
That'd be 13 games.
Yeah.
I know, but why would it list us as 13 games and then as 12 if they played in the conference championship?
What year was it?
2011.
Maybe they didn't have I bet the Big East didn't.
Oh, we didn't have a conference championship that year.
Yeah, we did. Was
No,
our
like
first one
Nebraska
back.
had already left, hadn't they?
No, it was that was when we played Nebraska. That was when Nebraska left.
So
It was the 2010 season.
well, that's 12 team.
2011.
It's a 12-game season plus a conference
The Big East
championship.
must not have had a conference championship
Yeah.
game.
Maybe they didn't.
Right.
But we had to play 14 games. We didn't play 13 games.
You're right. Sure.
It's a mystery.
So we split the difference. I thought they were 9-3.
But still, an 8-win team
Close,
getting
good
into a big game like that. I knew. I really
Yeah,
thought
but
it was 7.
it wasn't a playoff game. It was just Fiesta.
No, but it
Yeah.
was. But it was
Yeah.
one of the pinnacle of bowl games.
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying.
I loved every second.
And it was an automatic qualifier. Is my point.
It was
did like
very
it.
mad.
I loved every second of it.
I felt like we were back.
That was Andrew Jones out there.
I felt like
dominating.
it gave me hope. False hope.
Fiesta had a cool trophy too.
So it's going to be interesting seeing it all going forward. And obviously we're moving forward. Speaking of that, with OU more specifically, how do you guys feel about everything how it's shaking out? It's been a really strange, tumultuous offseason. We've lost a lot of players. I would argue a lot of players that we are fine losing for one reason or another, either because they were not big producers, didn't have a lot of promise, or are not worth to us what they were getting on the open market. And hey, if you can get 3x somewhere else versus what we think you're worth, have at it. We'll go fill that spot. So I feel pretty good about the incoming transfer class. That it's ranked really highly. The outgoing is just numerous in number and numerous or momentous in the way they were ranked as high school recruits and a little bit of production on the field, but not a lot. It's tough to lose Zach Alley, but I think that's a loss we can endure. We're going to talk about where we are then in the coaching search and all that. What do you guys' take on where we are in the offseason?
I feel. I mean, compared to what I felt like when the floodgates opened, I feel okay. Like, I mean, obviously the wide receiver room is still. I think we're back to what 2 years ago when we were talking about that being the biggest question mark, not knowing who's going to catch the ball, and
Mhm.
you know, so
Which was a
hopefully
better year than last year,
than
where
last
we thought it was
yeah.
loaded.
So, and we've picked up them. It's not like there's any big names in that group that we picked up, but we'll see what happens with the DC hire. And like you said, we'll get into it in a minute. Zach Alley being gone, like if Brent Venables has to call plays, I think that's kind of what he's been doing the whole time anyways. So I'm not super concerned if that's, what ends up being the case. He's going to be coaching for his life and his job, but I'm not really.
His life job. He won't actually be coaching for his life unless you. I don't know what you've done.
Brent Venables kind of seems like the guy who'd be coaching for his life.
Could be.
No, I'm not deterred by it. I'm actually pretty excited. Brought in some pretty big names or a couple of good names on the defensive side. And retain the retention. I think we talked about it at dinner. The retention that we've maintained with some of those key players is huge.
Yeah, that's 1A, B, and C is player retention, offensive coordinator, and John Mateer.
Yeah.
Everything else, you just have to hope upon your scouting reports and what you think you can do with these players. They were productive at other levels, and they have the measurables that you look for, and you just have to hope that the coordinator can turn these guys into productivity in the SEC. That's the concern.
I think the retention on defense, and then if Kendall Dolby comes back to what he was and Gentry can come back to what he was, I think you have to have tons of hope for elite defense, because
A better
you're
defense.
losing Danny and Billy, and we all think Billy had a down year. But all these guys getting a little bit older and in the system another year. Even if you bring in a random defensive coordinator, it still brings defense. I think it sucks losing Allie, because everybody talked about him being a mini Brent Venables and his mentor and all that stuff. So the whole thing still seems weird, unless he's trying to make a name for himself by going to Rich Rod and showing that it's his defense now. He's in charge. He doesn't have to share credit with Brent. I can understand that. Outside of that, the whole thing seems weird, because he said Brent was like a second father to him. So to come for a year and the defense show that much of an improvement, and with all the guys you got coming back, the whole move still seems weird, unless it's for that reason.
And what's so funny is, like, maybe we'd feel differently if we got to hear from this guy every week.
Yeah.
We heard from him like one time
Yeah.
in a very loose press setting. So I think it was just, I mean,
Maybe that's part of it, though. That's the shadow.
it wasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not like, there was no attachment as a fan base to him. I think it was more so of everything that we'd heard about
Mhm.
him, and the fact that our defense was very good this year. But overall, like, as you said, it's just strange.
Yeah,
Like, it's a very odd
And
thing.
honestly, looking back on it, I don't discredit anything that he brought to the program this year with the defense. Like, I don't feel like, oh, we were still running Brent Venables' defense and it was all his doing. I actually felt like Allie was doing a good
He
job.
did
So-
more.
I don't-
Ted Roof did.
but I mean, I don't feel like he was in the shadow.
Right.
I never looked at him as in the
didn't either.
shadow.
Yeah.
So if he felt that way, it must be his own viewpoint of it, because
His
I don't think the fans. I can't speak for everybody, but I don't know if everyone.
I mean,
really
maybe it
felt
was a
that way.
national media situation where
Yeah.
it's always Brent Venables' defense.
Yeah, it might
And it
not be
always
the
will be.
fans.
I
It
mean-
might be he's worried about his image nationally and
His
what the
prospects of
next
being a head
job
coach
is going to
later or
be.
something, I don't know.
Well, it's like
And he's
Lincoln.
making a lot more money, and he will be in the spotlight.
It's like Lincoln naming an offensive coordinator. You will never get credit for that.
Right.
Levy,
So
Levy and
it's the
Kiffin.
same
We
thing.
never gave Levy his
Right.
much given.
Very similar.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to say supremely cautiously optimistic. I'm not that excited as you guys are about Arbuckle and Mateer. I still think the offensive line has a long ways to go to be productive in the pass game, because our running game got better the last 4 or 5 games of the year once the offensive line got settled, but the pass blocking was never there.
No.
Against Navy, it was there. Against Bama, all we could do was run the ball. I mean, what do you have, like 130 yards passing or something crazy low in that game? And obviously, I think Jackson Arnold was part of that, because he was so skittish from getting just killed the whole season when he was a quarterback. He's having to not keep his eyes downfield because he's worried about guys coming up and nailing him. So a lot of that skepticism for me on the offense is, yeah, Arbuckle might be Lincoln 2.0. I hope he is. Tier might be the new Baker Mayfield. That'll be great. But
Still gonna block.
you have to block on the pass. And we had how many freshman wide receivers last year that showed no promise whatsoever? Kearney did absolutely nothing for me. Reagan's did absolutely nothing for me. We still don't have a legit tight end.
Carry
I
on.
don't care. Carry on the final game of the season. They finally decided to use him. He was great against Navy. He had 5 inches on the defender. We still, as many times as we did throw to him, I talked about this in the post game.
Underused.
I was at the game and they literally could have thrown to him 70% of the play calls and he would have had 250 yards.
You did say how good his routes were too.
Yeah,
I think
he did
there's-
have good routes. But the other guys, I mean, if Burks comes back to how he was the first 3 or 4 games of the season before he got hurt, and Carry On shows promise, and maybe 2 of these transfer guys turn out to be
You could give
solid,
Gibson back.
then we'll have a lot to look forward to. But right now, until I see the spring game and see what this offense looks like with my own eyes, I don't see us winning more than 7 games.
I mean, the kid from Arkansas had 400 yards receiving in the SEC. doesn't sound like a lot, but we would have taken that all day this year for us. So really just to play devil's advocate to you, I think it's really easy to tell on plays when it's the offensive line's fault. And I think it's really hard to tell when it's the quarterback's fault or especially the receiver's fault because you don't get to see it as much
Or the offensive
on
coordinator's
TV.
fault.
Right. So it's hard to
Having
really
go to the games. You can see what those routes look like in person, especially from the best
I know,
seats in the
but-
house and the end zone.
I know, but they might be running what they're supposed to run. It doesn't mean it was designed well.
Yeah.
So maybe Kearney is incredible with proper route trees and play calling or whatever. I don't know, but I think it's much easier, or it's harder to tell how big of a difference it's going to be when you have a competent offensive coordinator because
Mhm.
last year was just as bad. It was worse than any of us thought it could possibly be. And even when it was taken over, it got minutely better.
At times,
Yeah, at times, but it's still. I mean, I don't even think we know how bad it is. I know it wasn't that long ago that we had a good offense. It was only been a year ago.
seems like a decade.
But I feel like when we see it again, it's gonna feel like this whole brand new
Like
shiny
a
toy.
rebirth of the whole
Like, oh my
program.
God! Like
Well, I
it
think
was
that
such a long year.
that's
of
what I
bad
wanted to
offense.
talk about. So I think it's a very difficult thing to take it all in and understand the right perspective because your cautious optimism, Lucas, is like I maybe sort of as you described it, cautious. I think we're all cautiously optimistic, but all of us are also susceptible to. We know how bad it was last year. It's hard to evaluate how good it's going to be. Even fast forward to we're in the middle of the season and it's going pretty well. We're grading on a weird curve because we're grading against such a bad offense. Not a bad offense for OU, a really, really inept bad offense. The stats don't tell how bad that offense was.
A half a century's bad off.
Yeah, just like, and beyond that, just and maybe this
We
is
kept comparing stuff to 96, 97, 98.
yeah, right.
That's how bad it was.
And it's hard to completely appreciate the fact that when we're up there in the stands, it was like we felt with the defense in 2018 and 2019, where you felt like we just got to score because we can't stop anybody. And then it was the reverse where we cannot do offensive stuff.
If we lose a lead, we're going to lose the game.
Exactly. A 3-point deficit is it. That's done.
We did. At Missouri,
Yeah, and so
LSU,
it's hard to know, like,
Yes.
so he could be, here's what I wrestle with. He doesn't have to be that much better to be so much better than we were last year. It could be that he's phenomenal. Talking about Arbuckle and Mateer and the whole package. In which case, obviously, we're phenomenal because the defense is going to be really good. He could just be adequate, in which we're still going to be pretty good. We're going to be very competitive. If he's just productive and adequate, that'll hide and paper over a lot of what our kind of ceiling is. What is the ceiling, I think, is the question. We want championship ceiling. Can we get there? Are we going to get there? Are we going to get there with Brent Venables? Are we going to get there with this combination? It's got to be this combination because, like you say, he's fighting proverbially for his life, his coaching life, and it's got to work this year. The other thing that is, and I guess we got to appreciate this, with all of the question marks of DeMarco Murray, Emmett Jones, even Bill Bedenbaugh, a good offensive coordinator and a really good team and complementary football can cover up for some deficiencies there, and that's fine. That's going to happen. We saw it throughout the Stoops era. You see it through really the history of every major program that has a lot of success. Guys that are really great in their position, even as coordinators, but especially as position coaches, and then go on to kind of fizzle. And you're like, wow, they were so good. I remember like where's Steve Spurrier the third now or junior, whatever he was. I don't remember. Yeah. Those receivers who were nobodies were just dynamite, never dropped a ball. And he never went anywhere. He never did anything. So it was a great team and a great everything coming together. So Emmett Jones doesn't have to be the greatest receivers coach ever, but he does have to be pretty good. He has to be great, when you have an offensive coordinator as bad as we had last year, and he's not that good, and DeMarco Murray's not that good. He may get there, but he's not that good. But he may be good enough with the right coordinator. So it's either make this work, keep it going, and buy you some time before you have to reload, or maybe they stick together forever. Or if Arbuckle's great, you may lose him after a year or two. And so it could be a weird situation where they have a lot of success in this coming season, and then we're back to kind of square one as we try to reset, and he's got to go hire new guys to fill roles.
And it's a good test run for that stability, that long-term stability that you want as well. Like if we test run well with Arbuckle, he does great, leaves after a year or two. It's like, all right, like we can do this. Like we can do this short-term coordinator thing as long as we get the right guy.
Which is the Alabama model.
Exactly. Hopefully you're if that happens, you lean on the vetting process and everything else that you went through with Arbuckle, and you go in and bring the next guy in. And you bring in the Steve Sarkisian to Alabama type of guy and stuff like that.
And never make the mistakes that Brent made repeatedly in his first few years here of making bad hires.
Yep.
He's got to not do that anymore.
I think what's really, really interesting going into this year, and of course, I don't know every player and every offensive coordinator and where they went, but I really can't think of hardly anybody outside of one that hits close to home, where the portal quarterback is coming with his quarterback coach and his offensive coordinator. The only other time I can think of that is Caleb Williams to USC.
Yeah.
And he went on to win the Heisman the next year.
And had they had a defense, they could have won anything that
They
won.
would have went to the
Because
Yeah,
there's
they
a
probably
lot
could
of
have won
teams,
a national
like actually
championship.
both teams this year in the national championship, both had portal quarterbacks and both had offensive coordinators that came in from elsewhere, but they weren't already paired together.
Right.
So they had to learn everything together and mesh everything together. You're legit bringing a level of experience at arguably the most important position on the field, and he's comfortable and knows everything. So you're not having to get
It's no learning
at
curve.
worst, your quarterback's not up to having to get up to speed.
Right.
You
Or
kind of
your
did,
OC,
you kind of did it with Levy and Gator.
kind of, but it was
Obviously,
still
he had
several
a year in
years,
between.
Right.
a couple years.
Well, it's almost like Mark Mangino and Heupel.
They
Even though
worked
they didn't
together
come
for
from
a
somewhere else, they were working together, and so it's a new offensive coordinator. I mean, it's that kind of a
Yeah.
it's that kind of a synergy.
So here's a hypothetical. Me and Jay talked about a little bit on the drive down. If the defense stays static in rankings, they're
Still
really,
really good.
they're really good. The offense goes from what we were at 110, let's say,
No, we were like
120.
120, and the offense goes to 70. What does the record of this team look like? Only, I do this in quotes, only moving up from 120 to 70.
That's 50 spots.
I
That's
said,
a lot of spots.
I said,
But also, when
I
Jay
didn't
was
say
reading
wins
this,
or losses. I will be extremely disappointed if we're the 70th ranked offense.
and remember the
70.
stats from the last pod when
Oh,
Jay,
right. Yeah, I
and
agree.
the difference between,
And the bet is
50
on.
and 80 is like half a yard per play and like 50 yards per game or whatever, because the numbers,
Not a lot. Yeah.
all the teams, when you add it all up, the numbers are bunched together.
We didn't
Right.
look at scoring offense.
But
though,
even if
like
we go
points per game.
from-
We look
yeah.
at yards per
It's
game.
also
We look at
tight.
scoring.
It's also tight.
Is it
We do
pretty
look at
tight?
scoring
Mhm.
defense. Scoring defense is weird.
Yeah. It's not a lot of gap,
But if you go from 120 to 70,
or it doesn't seem like a lot of gap.
I still think you're looking at a 7-5 season with this schedule.
I don't think so. I mean, we were so. I mean, it's like no improvement. And we were 6-6 with
I mean,
this schedule.
we have a harder schedule this year than we did last year.
I mean,
Because you're bringing Michigan in. That's a tougher team right there. They won a national championship year before.
okay, how much
They just
tougher
beat the
are they
Nationals.
than Tulane and
The last
and
game they
Houston?
played before bowl game, which I don't even know who they played the bowl game.
I mean, it is
Okay.
a single game that could be a loss.
So their last two games,
Yeah,
they
they're
beat
definitely
the
better.
national champion,
They
Ohio
didn't,
State,
but they didn't score 20 points.
and they
against
beat-
State.
but they still won. They beat the national champion, Ohio State,
Right,
in Columbus, right?
right.
Yeah, that was in Columbus.
With Ohio State not
And
feeling
then
the
they
football.
beat Alabama. So we have that team who's not as good as they were 2 years ago than won a championship, but they're still a really good
They're better than
Out of
Houston.
conference
They're
team.
better than Tulane.
that's
Yeah.
coming here. And then you have to flip the schedule. You go to South Carolina. their fans are great, like you always talk about.
Mhm,
That
That
they
game's
don't-
gonna be
those
tough.
fans don't deserve that team.
mhm.
You've got Bama on the road. That's going to be super
Team
tough.
that-
You got to go to Tennessee. That's the loudest stadium I've ever been in, outside of the Blackhawks and
Right.
conference championship. But
LSU at home,
you get
Missouri at
LSU
home.
Missouri at home,
Those are two losses that probably flip to wins.
Auburn at home, Ole Miss at home.
Ole Miss. I don't know that you're
Win,
going to
win,
run the
win,
table at
win.
home. Brent has proven he's only one of the 3 seasons he's won all his home games.
If they're gonna do it though, it's gonna be conference-wise, it'd be next year.
So I think you could easily lose to Ole Miss at home. You should be Missouri. You could easily lose to LSU at home. It'd be a super tough win to win at Tennessee. It'd be a very tough win to win at Alabama, and it would be a very tough win to win at South Carolina with Sellers. So,
Okay, so I look
so
at it
you're
like
looking
this.
at about the same win loss.
I look at it
unless
this though.
something major happens.
We were 6, but I think this might be major enough.
to get to the
From
top
120 to
30 in
70?
offense.
From 120 to 70, that means we need to be we have a chance to be competitive in every one of those games. We probably will be. We were competitive in all but the Texas game.
South Carolina.
We were competitive in South Carolina aside from 3 fluky turnovers to begin the game.
From the 56-minute mark.
Yeah, we were extremely competitive. So I would say we were
And
competitive
Tennessee
in all
shut it
those
down,
games.
remember?
We're so
I don't
got
think
their
they
big
did.
lead. They
so
shut it
we're
down.
better.
I don't think they
Yeah,
did.
right. Yeah, we're competitive in those games last year, and we were 6-6. With that type of improvement, I think that if the over under is 7.5, I think that has a chance of being the bet of the decade. Easy on the over. If you tell me that we've moved that much or more in offense, and the defense is as good, and I think you're underselling how good the defense could be, because you've kind of put a cap on how good it could be. It very well could be better, and you're definitely putting a cap on how good the offense could be. So I think like with those as the bare minimum of how good we should expect they have done in terms of maintain and improve, 7-5 doesn't sound hard to me at all.
Well, I think what's interesting too with the defense is they basically never played with a lead or with any
Comfort.
dictation to what the other offense has to do. So,
You're never up by 14 and they're having to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a factor. The 20 fumbles and the 5 losses we had, that's just absurd. I mean, you cut that in half and we might have 2 more football. As bad as we were.
Everything else the same.
Yeah, 2 more wins. And we so I think the offense is worse than we even can fathom this past year. And
I
we
can fathom a
almost
lot. It
won
was really
7
bad.
regular season football.
It was so bad.
It was just
And Steve, you said it. I mean, we said it, but like we'll say it again. It was like watching the 2018 defense on the other side of the ball. Like it was that bad. There was not a shred of confidence. And then every time that we would do something correctly, we would completely negate it the next drive.
I mean, first downs were wins.
Oh
That was
yeah.
a win.
Right.
Getting past midfield was huge.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
We've
Avoiding
got something going.
avoiding
He
the
thinks
3
it's
and
like
out.
K-State, where every time you get a first down, everybody's getting all excited.
Yeah, we got to
Because
get
that's
out of
how it was
that.
towards
We
the
have
end of the
got
year.
to get out of that. So we keep kind of glossing over how good the defense is going to be, taking it with a bit of an assumption to a degree. Let's talk about the defensive coordinator opening. The talk of the town is, the rumor mill is that Jim Knowles is very interested. Is it his wife or his girlfriend? Or his fiance?
Fiance.
It's
Fiance.
a fiance. Okay,
Does anybody know
everyone's
what the situation is of why she's still here and he's up there?
She doesn't want to leave.
I know, but does anybody know? Like, is it her job? Does she have kids?
Her
What-
son, I believe, is a high school senior,
So they met when he was at Oklahoma State.
most likely.
And then he went from Oklahoma State to State.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. There was no team. So he's been there 3 years now? 2.
Maybe just 2 or 3.
So
Yeah.
they had long distance relationship, whatever.
right.
He's making 2.2 million a year and she's like, I'm not pulling my kid out of school, he's staying here or something like that. Or, I mean, that's
Something like that.
maybe she's divorced and she can't move because the kids are still young enough to,
Could be.
I don't know. We don't know what the
Could
situation is. It's great. To me, it's only hinging because of that.
Yes,
Like,
I agree.
If
If it's a
that's
foot-
not a case, then this is not even
No,
discussion.
if it's a football only decision,
You stay at Ohio State.
as much as we obviously love our team,
Unless Ryan Day's.
Unless Ryan
Okay,
Day is
unless
tough
they're-
to work with,
is-
yeah.
or if the Ohio
Hey.
State fans are tough. If the death threats and all of that stuff is just too much, and he's like, "This is a better situation." I mean, we go
and he
in
might
and
not
out.
be a northern guy. you
He
know?
might not be a northern guy. We talk about with a little bit of derision the soul mission and all that. That kind of stuff could really mean a lot to him. He could say the culture at OU and the culture of Brent Venables is the right
Where I
culture
wanna
for
work.
me. It might be where he wants to work, in addition to everything else. Now,
And I'm tired of not,
I think he's
Tired of
59.
winning national championships.
tired of not fornicating.
I think he's 59 or 60, and he's been coaching for like 30 years.
Yeah.
He just won his first national championship. So if I want to give you like the positive version of it, he won that game. He has nothing left to prove. If you can move close to home, get a pay raise, keep the new wife happy, that's a pretty win-win scenario as a 60-year-old man.
You think
You
we'll
think
pay
this is a
raise?
pay raise? I think
I don't
this
think
is a
we'll pay raise.
for sure.
I think it'll be
I think
for.
it goes from 2.2 to like 1.7. I don't think OU's paying.
If we do that, it's
2.4.
such a bigger win than you can even imagine.
I don't know though.
No,
I-
because
You know the saying, and I'm not gonna say it because it's a
Yeah.
family podcast, but there's something that's undefeated.
Yes, it is.
So everybody knows what that is. We're not gonna say it.
yeah, yeah.
But I don't think OU's giving him a raise. I don't think they're matching the 2.2
I bet they
because
do.
I guarantee you,
I bet they do.
If he walks into the AD's office and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to OU," and they go, "We'll pay you 2.5 to stay," and he still leaves and comes here.
Well,
for
that'd be Zach
1.8 or
Alley.
whatever.
That'd be Zach Alley. I could see him, aside from the Zach Alley where he got a big raise, I could see him getting comparable money, slightly less, maybe a different package, like, okay, it's a little of this and a little of that, so that in a 5-year deal, maybe it works out to be about the same. And Ohio State tries to counter with more money, and he says, it ain't money at this point. I'm a millionaire. That's not enough. I got these other things.
The other thing I've been hearing is the assurance that if Brent is fired after a lackluster season this year, OU still guaranteeing he's the defensive coordinator
Ooh,
on a 3-year deal.
I don't like that at all. You got to let the new guy pick his coaches.
If that's what it takes to get him to come here, I don't hate it.
I think you do
If
a
you're
bigger
just throwing it
buyout.
out there just because,
No,
then
I
maybe
think
I don't like it. But
The way
if
you do
he's-
that with it is a bigger
if he's
buyout.
looking for job security and he's like,
A
I
$5
have to
million
have a
offer.
3-year deal for
Yeah, I
1.8
think you
or
just
whatever
say,
the number's
nah.
gonna be.
I don't think
And
it's a
even if
guaranteed
Brent
job. I don't think there's any
That's-
way you do that.
That's what I've been hearing.
I think that
Is
sounds
they're
silly.
guaranteeing him 3-year contract to stay.
I would be surprised by that, and I think it's a bad deal all
It would be
around.
very
I think
Josie.
you would be yeah, it would be maybe very
I don't think it's the
Josie.
end of the world because
I
then
think
you
the
just
way-
bring in
no.
an offensive head coach.
That's as bad. I mean,
If you just trust him to
If
run
he-
your
No,
defense
I
for
don't
3
think you can
years,
do
If he wasn't considered arguably the top defensive coordinator
Yes.
in the entire country,
Right.
I would say that's a horrible deal. Anyone that comes in, if they could retain him, they would probably do
But
everything they could
what you
to
gotta
retain
what
him.
you gotta worry.
So what's the
Yes,
difference if you
probably
just
true. Except you don't know who that guy is, and he may say, Jim Knowles dated my wife in high school or whatever it is. We don't get along.
Bygones be bygones.
And yeah,
Never
I don't know.
games.
I don't think you do it that way. I think you say, look, hey, your buyout is astronomical for a defensive coordinator. So therefore, it's as good as a guarantee of having a 3-year job. You're getting 3-year money no matter what. That's the way I could see it.
Well,
being
if you look at it,
structured.
what USC did when they grabbed Lincoln, they should have done that deal with Lincoln and told him, "You're not picking your defensive coordinator because you obviously can't do it.
You're right.
You need to we're bringing in this guy
You're
because
right.
he's a proven defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
You're
that's
not
true.
bringing Grant.
Would that not
Different
be?
We
situation.
want you as an offensive genius to come in here.
Is
and
that not-
work,
Is that not?
and he probably wins a national
Is
championship.
that
and takes
not
the first
more
year.
like an NFL model?
Well, that's a
Which-
GM model.
Yes.
Yes.
Which OU?
They don't usually keep coordinators; they change head coaches.
Well, they make a lot of decisions at the GM level, though, and so it's not where it's traditionally in college. It's been the coach makes all those decisions.
Yeah.
We could be going to that world. I don't know.
Like I said, I'm with Jay. If this isn't the guy that is a top 3 defensive coordinator in the country, I mean, you'd say Lanning is up there, and he's the head coach still. You say Venables is up there, but as a strictly defensive coordinator, Knowles is probably the number 1 guy. Look what he did
Oh, I
when he was
agree.
at OSU.
No
They
doubt
led the
about it.
country in turnovers.
No doubt about it.
So I can see making that deal with him saying,
Maybe.
if we do have a bad season because Mateer gets hurt and you lose the top 5 wide receivers again or something stupid, and your offense stays crappy and you go 6-6 again, Brent's gone, but you're still here.
Yeah,
We're going to
I
bring
get
in
the
a
idea
head
of the deal.
coach. It's going to be
I
an
just
offensive
don't,
guy.
I get the idea. I just
And you
would
do
be
it.
surprised if they do it, and I don't think I would like it.
I
But
wouldn't be.
that's kind of
And if I
neither
was
here nor there.
if I was a coach looking to take the OU job, maybe you couldn't get a Jim to come with you. So you might be like, hell yeah, I've already got Jim
Oh,
Knowles
sure,
there.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, I understand that. It harkens back to me to the days of Watson Brown and Gary Gibbs, because that's a lot of what the talk was then, is they wanted to keep Watson Brown and get rid of Gibbs. And that was a whole messed up situation. It's why we didn't get Mac Brown as a coach, which was probably a disappointment, even though that would have meant, but we didn't get Bob Stoops eventually. But because he didn't want to get the job he thought his brother deserved. But I just don't like the idea of it. Besides, though, getting past the idea of Jim Knowles as the coach, which I think would be, if we could push the magic button, what we'd all choose.
What are the chances you guys think? Right?
Oh, good question. Before we get into the alternative,
I think at this point, with nobody being named and him not denying it in the pregame, I think it's 50-50.
I agree. I think 50-50 is a good one. It's like, got to just weigh his options. He's seriously considering it. It's on the table.
I'm
can
not
see that.
disappointed if he doesn't.
I agree.
I'm neutral.
I agree.
I think it's
Yeah, I
fantastic.
couldn't blame him at all for staying
Yeah,
at Ohio State.
I mean, if it happens, I actually think not that
It helps
the
the
defense
reputation of the
might not
program.
get better. I
Yeah.
think the perception,
Yeah.
it's a big time perception thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it maybe awakens a lot of people nationally to be like, okay, maybe OU isn't done just yet.
Yeah.
And if you can get that kind of guy to come back for whatever the reason actually is, even if it is the what's undefeated reason, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
No,
at all.
I totally agree.
because it changes.
So chances. What do you think the chances are as we stand here today?
Yeah,
And I think the announcement's coming this week.
I don't think it's gonna happen just because
So
these sort of
30,
things
70?
just don't.
Yeah, what, 37?
51-40. It's not.
51-49 in favor of it not happening.
Not.
All right, I'll go out on a limb. I'll say 60-40. It is going to happen.
I'm kind of hedging expectations on my end. I'm saying 40-60 that it will.
So,
But to
I'll go 51-49.
That it will.
does.
so
but
will, won't.
So I'm the only
to
one.
what Jay said.
No, he said won't.
Oh, you?
Yeah, I said won't,
Oh.
but 40-60 in favor of.
Because it's undefeated.
But I will say
30% for
I am past neutral though. Like I'm not gonna
Sure.
be devastated. I'm gonna be bummed because of the talk and like
Yeah.
the
It's
expectation
gone
where
this long.
because of what you guys just said, like it would be a massive boost. I think more importantly, it would allow Brent Venables to really sit and
Yes.
take control of the freaking program as a head coach.
Yes.
And say, I've got Jim Knowles. I don't have to babysit anybody. Like, yeah, I trusted Zach Allen,
agree.
but he's still new.
I agree.
And-
It's suboptimal if he doesn't get it. It's optimal if he gets it. If we doesn't get it, then there's more difficulty in front of Brent
It's a lot of
Venables
pressure on
to
Brent.
figure things out.
It's a lot of
Because
pressure
he's
on
got to decide what is he going to do. Is he going to get Brandon Hall in there? Is he's going to call the defense, and does he go get the guy from Clemson? Does he like what does he do? And I guess the latest talk is that, at least as an analyst, the Clemson guy who's a linebacker coach, I think, right there.
Mhm.
You start bringing these people in, which is great, but that's a lot of pieces that you've got to wrangle and figure out and plug in the right place. Jim Knowles just plugs in.
Yeah.
Jim Knowles just, here we go.
Because he runs similar defense
Very,
as Brent,
very,
right?
yeah.
Like it's very, very simple.
And
But
I'll
even
say,
if it's not similar,
Right. It's
at
Jim
some
Knowles.
point, Brent has
Jim
to say,
Knowles.
he might know what he's doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Well,
go
I
do this
think
thing.
They
over
just
here.
won a national
If you
But
need
championship.
me, I'll be in the corner.
I
Right.
think what we'll do is I think that Jim Knowles will learn our terminology and not the other way around.
Right.
Like I don't
agree.
think we're gonna
Agreed.
change the name of all what we
Agreed.
do on defense.
Agreed.
Venables and him will sit down and be like, I call this
Yeah.
a 4-2-0 blitz, whatever. What
Right.
do you call it? Oh, I call it. It's like, well, okay, well,
Well, shut up.
Just-
Yeah. Well, here's what we're going to call it, and you're going to do it.
That's
it's a lot
cool. That's
easier
cool,
for
Jim.
him.
Shut up.
It's a lot easier for him to change one person's terminology on plays than all of the
Absolutely.
players to
Absolutely.
switch up.
Well, and I don't think
Absolutely.
Brent would have it any
yeah,
other way.
agree.
Brent has spent too much time.
The other really interesting part that could be a positive if we do get Knowles there is another portal window,
Right.
and you don't know
No.
what his presence could actually bring to you.
Well, and if Ryan Day
Not-
leaves,
Oh.
if Ryan Day leaves,
wow.
and you start freaking, and it's like, hey,
Could be
I'm
an
going to you.
exodus.
And
there.
there's not
Well,
that we have a
He
lot
could
of
he could
spots.
get the head coaching job. He might be a candidate for the.
That could be
You
true.
could-
That could be as well.
But
But
the NFL jobs are filling up. Where's Day go? The
uh,
Bears is done. The Jets are done. The Raiders is open. Ryan Day's not Cowboys. So I don't think there's.
I don't know what Ryan Day is.
The only,
to tell you the
I
truth.
think the
Jim
only
Knowles is
opportunity was
not
really
an
going to be the
NFL
Bears,
No.
and that job's filled.
Well, that aside, if he comes, I think you start to look at opportunities in that portal window of obviously anybody who's deep on the depth chart at Ohio State, young, who wants to play for him. You also might get a guy who just says, you know what, I'd really rather be with Jim than here. I can do as much at Oklahoma as I'm doing here. I'm ready to do this. And you also might get guys on offense, as weird as that sounds. Guys that say, he makes the move and it makes it okay, and he helps. You never know the
It's a
relationship
familiar
he's got
factor.
there.
Yeah.
It's the familiarity factor, and so you may get a few guys on offense that way. I don't know.
And even non-Ohio State guys.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, there's
Oh,
a
yeah,
lot of players close by that might be like, shoot, okay, maybe I need to take a look at this.
Yeah, well, guys that he was in on that went somewhere else, and then now it hasn't worked out, and there wasn't a spot there, but there,
Yeah, how many of those Ohio State guys are going to be in the NFL?
Oh yeah,
A lot.
a
Yeah,
lot.
That's the other part
Nolan's
of
going to
it.
be able to be like, look at these 6 guys from this year's team that I helped put in the NFL come to Oklahoma. Look at
Well, also
But
that he
it's
doesn't
also a
have to
reason
work
to
with.
not come back
Yeah,
to Ohio State.
exactly.
Because he
Starting fresh.
he does get to look at our roster,
Yeah.
and you arguably might have the best defensive line in the country. You've got very solid linebackers, and you've got potentially
A tremendous.
elite secondary.
Yeah.
Maybe. So he gets to do what you see other people do that hop around to just like Urban Meyer did, just like
Yeah.
whoever had the best quarterback in the country, I'll start head coaching over there. But he can
The
do the same
reverse
thing. Maybe
transfer
he
portal.
doesn't want to go through a rebuild,
year or two
not a
growing
rebuild, but a reload at Ohio State, and he can look at our roster and say, I can work with that.
And I
And
don't
that's-
think, man, you think Ryan Day's on the hot seat with the fans still?
Yes,
You think,
not the same as Brent Venables, obviously,
no.
but I think
I mean,
he's
with the-
on.
I mean-
Here's the deal.
they can't beat Michigan. So
Yes,
if I'm an OU fan and we lost to Texas 4 years in a row, but we won the national championship, I'm not complaining about that.
you gotta understand. We have warm weather down here. The cold weather shuts their brains down up there, and they can't see past the blue.
The Natty
That's
obviously
all they
changed
see.
it.
It changes
It
it.
changed.
Yes, absolutely, it changes
That
it.
bought him at least 2 years, if not 3.
Yeah, I don't think it's
They're not
LSU.
LSU.
Right, they're
No,
not LSU,
But
but they're still crazy,
if
and they're still fast. It's hard to. I'll tell you the truth.
Okay,
It's
but-
kind of like Brent Venables. It's going to be hard for people to ever love Brent Venables because of how they've been burned in these seasons. And even if he wins a national championship, it's not going to feel the same as the Bob Stoops experience, just because of the way it started. They will always be up against that.
But if you're Ryan Day too, maybe that machine's just too much.
He's up against going 11-1 every year.
Yeah,
or
maybe he
10-2,
just doesn't
like,
want that.
No, I'm saying that
Literally, the only downside an Ohio State fan could possibly say about Ryan Day is the loss to Michigan.
no.
Everything else
You're
about
saying
that
two different
program
things.
is incredible.
If you're talking about the fans don't like that guy the way they should like that guy.
Only colors his beard. He looks weird.
He does look weird.
He looks like a
And so I'm saying from
a
a
movie
fan
villain.
perspective, I don't think they love him as much as they should probably. You're saying the machine of Ohio State may be wearing on Ryan
on
Day.
Ryan Day. Yeah.
And I think there's truth in both of
Because-
those.
yeah.
Ryan Day to Penn State.
Well, and here's the other thing: if Ryan Day left,
That's
they
a
already
big-
have a guy that the fans would adore, that could move right in. That is a program guy from there before.
Who's it?
Marcus Freeman.
Oh,
He
no
was an
way.
Ohio State
That would
linebacker.
be incredible.
That would be incredible.
He's one of the top 5 hottest
That would
coaches in the
be
country.
Incredible.
He could go from Notre Dame and immediately step into that Ohio State job.
I don't
because They
know.
would throw the bag.
They would throw the
He may
bag.
go to-
I don't know.
He
if
may
he-
go to Las Vegas. Though.
I
He may
don't-
be able to go.
I don't know. I don't know what makes him tick. He seems to click more with Notre Dame than I ever thought he would,
He
though.
converted to Catholicism.
He converted. I mean, there's
There's still something to say about going.
there is, but maybe this is home now.
That would be
I don't know.
insane.
for me,
And I'm not saying this,
When
like,
I
if
look at
Day
those-
stays 2 more years,
I
and
know.
then the pressure gets blah, blah, blah.
Well,
Yeah.
Freeman State will
Yeah.
always be on that
Freeman-
list.
If I look at those
Yeah.
two fan bases,
I agree.
though, man, I'm taking Notre Dame every day before I'm taking Ohio State.
It's a
That's just a level of
visceral.
of rationality.
You got the easier path because they're not in a conference.
Beyond that,
That's what they
that's
want.
just icing on the cake.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying just like the fan bases. I mean, just you're talking
And
about
they're
some
both blue
crazy
blood
people.
programs. So
Yeah,
it's not a step up necessarily to go from Notre Dame to Ohio State, even though over the last 2 decades, Ohio State's been the better program.
It's a step up. I don't know. Like Freeman's a great coach. I don't know how sustainable what he's doing right now
Agreed.
is going to be. Like I
I don't know how sustainable Notre Dame is. Period.
Right.
Much less him.
I think, and I mean, we've seen it. We've seen Notre Dame get into the playoff. We saw them make a national championship against Alabama in 2012. That's as far as they've got,
And they got embarrassed.
and they got embarrassed. And the other night, the score was not
It
nearly
was
as close.
almost an embarrassment.
The
Right.
score, the
Yeah.
score was not nearly, or was closer than what the game should have been.
I'll put it this way. Excuse me. If Ohio State were as good as a perennial national champion is, it would have been an embarrassment for Notre Dame.
It would have been Georgia TCU
Yeah.
of a couple years ago.
Yeah, it would have been lopsided.
And it was
extremely
on that
lopsided.
track,
It was
and-
very close.
Yeah.
Which that gets glossed over. It
Oh,
never gets brought
absolutely.
up.
Yeah.
Because
Like
that
the game
was
never happened.
that was not a football game. That was practice for Georgia. And they were throwing
So-
against the next best thing to air.
I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts going on. You can't feel too comfortable
I like that
in
take.
any of
That's
these
fun.
positions.
I like
That's
that.
a very interesting
It's
take.
I mean, like,
That'd be
The
a
other guy that they could bring, which he's not going to be there now.
Vrabel?
Vrabel.
right.
He just took New England job.
He ain't gonna do that.
He's back home
Yeah.
NFL career wise.
Yeah.
But if he was still floating around and then Day decided, then Vrabel's an easy choice too.
Urban Meyer
Mhm.
come back.
I don't know if he could either.
Yeah,
Though.
I don't think he did.
you're
lot
you know,
of
you're a victim of your own success because what is Ryan Day's like 60 and
Oh, it's ridiculous.
He has a lot.
7 or something? I don't know.
It's
It's some ridiculous number.
Yeah.
And
He
that's
doesn't get
just
the respect.
hard
He doesn't get the
to,
respect he deserves.
that's just hard to keep.
Well, it's hard to keep up too. You look at any of these guys who existed in these power conferences before they got stronger. The Big Ten is a lot tougher than it has ever been. And his success came, it's kind of like the Big 12 if we had introduced several teams and you look at Lincoln Riley or whoever's schedule, the back half of Bob Stoops, but especially Lincoln Riley, and then you introduce these other very strong teams into it, you're thinking, well, you're never going to be able to live up to the expectation because the expectation you've set for yourself, which is a perennial conference title contender, and you're struggling to make the conference championship every year because the competition's tougher. It's definitely a lot tougher in the Big Ten, way tougher. Something that goes completely unappreciated, except maybe among us and others like us, is just how weak the Big Ten was, top heavy the Big Ten was for so long. They were even a little top heavy this year.
Yeah.
And that's with these additional teams. They're going to continue to get, if things work out the way they should, USC should be better than they are, right? Oregon's probably, I don't know, they're probably as good as they should be or maybe better than they should be. Michigan should be better. Indiana shouldn't be good. But you start to look at that conference and say it's got to kind of equilibrate a little bit at the top the way that the SEC has. So the SEC is not real top heavy. It's actually got a bunch of teams there vying for it, which we just beat each other up at this point. We're trying to kind of separate ourselves. So it's a tough environment when you're like that. And you get into situations like the SEC did this year where you're self-eliminating and you could make an argument that several teams should make the playoff. You turn around and look and several teams didn't make the playoff. And all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in and the teams that are there, you're like, God, they're only there because they kind of had an easy schedule.
Well, and I think you'll see the top heavy in the in the Big Ten a lot more just because of where the talent disparity is. Like everyone who's good in the Northeast goes to Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State. That's just what happens.
Well, and when and as a league, when you have just a couple of top heavies, the Big Ten is very smart about their schedule.
Right. I wonder if they'll
Well,
continue to be able to do that.
When they made those two conferences.
It's ridiculous.
When
the way
they
they-
separated the champions and
It's
the
ridiculous.
legends.
Legends and legends and leaders.
And yeah,
It was essentially Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and then Wisconsin would have a good run every 4 or 5 years. They'd have an amazing running back. And outside of those four,
That was it.
everybody else is.
That was it. Michigan State,
Rutgers,
but for half a
Maryland.
season would
Northwestern
look
had like 1 year in the
competitive.
middle 2000s.
Yeah, nothing, just nothing, a
Yeah.
bunch of nothings.
But now, with like you said, with Oregon and USC in there, it definitely makes that.
Potentially UCLA. UCLA
But
could sneak
also,
up and be
With
good.
no divisions, they're also just randomly scheduling how they're going to do things.
So there's got to be some order to this, right? I mean, both with the SEC and the Big Ten, we've got to get some semblance of
Something
some.
better than what they did to.
Well, I guarantee the SEC is looking at the Big Ten scheduling and, like you said, kind of beating each other
They're
up.
kicking themselves.
But there's not much you can do. In the
There's
SEC.
not, because
No,
you're gonna
there's
play
not.
good teams regardless.
If you've got
had
10
Alabama and Georgia not play each other for 12 years.
Right. If you're
Yeah, I
Sankey,
mean-
But I mean now,
Yeah.
now going forward, like it's really hard to kind of get like Texas's schedule for this year.
right?
Like that was just a perfect storm for Texas this year. You're gonna get more often you've got a really
Like four really tough games.
and then 4
Everybody has
hard games.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're Sankey, I think you have to look at it, and maybe that's what they're doing, is to say, look, we're not going to be able to manipulate the schedule. We're going to have to get more teams in one way or the other. So you've got to market yourself to get more teams in, and probably finagle it to say that's why they probably want, tell you about people that want 16. The SEC wants 16, so they can get a lot of teams in, and quite frankly, deserve to have a lot of teams in. And if things play out the way I think in a lot of years they will, depending on how the seeding goes, you easily could have a semifinals that's all SEC or 3 out of 4 are SEC for sure. Just based on history, recent history, how good these programs are, how good the South is versus the North, so many factors like that. Anything else to say about where you guys think we're headed in the off season? We obviously have spring coming up. Hopefully, here's a few things I don't want to see, but I know we'll get our share of them. I don't want to see a bunch of pictures of dudes roided out and how big they are. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to hear about how great somebody's looking against air or in camp or
How
whatever.
fast these receivers are.
I don't want to see. Yeah, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me this crap. Don't.
Testing numbers are testing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a whole different thing
But it's-
from how you're doing in practice.
It's pump and hype
It's a testing
season.
number.
They got to stop that crap. I just want them to do the work in the off season. I want to hear that it's coming together. I kind of want to be cautiously optimistic because I know come August I'm going to be drinking some
What
Kool-Aid.
happens when we hear Kanik is an incredible H-back?
I will be.
That actually won't surprise
Or
me.
we hear-
surprise
I'll
us
just
at
be
all.
pissed.
Won't
Won't surprise us at all.
Why did
Frank
they-
Grantham 2.0, or we're gonna hear all
If
kinds of
Vegas,
ridiculousness.
if Vegas would give me the odds, I would put $100,
$100 whole dollars.
100
Woo!
hold on,
American dollars.
on Kanik
100 Trump dollars.
leading the team in touchdown.
Assuming he
I'll
gets the
take that
HVAC job.
$100 right now.
Huh?
I'm in. I'll take that $100
I
right
want
now.
my odds though. I
Oh,
want
the
my
odds.
odds.
That's hard as an HVAC.
I'll give you 2-to-1 odds right now.
Do you know how many short yardage touchdowns this mofo's gonna have?
So
Do you understand
We might have
Maybe
to-
that's good short
beast-
yardage.
the beast?
Fast.
Do you understand the wildcat amount of touchdowns, Bell Dozer style that Kanik is gonna have this year?
well, here's the
How
other
many
thing that
passes
might
do you
happen.
think
Because
it's gonna
get-
Robinson is a better runner.
If everybody
as
else is
big as
doing their
Kanik.
job, he's the left open guy. He's Stoops with speed.
Over under 2.5 touchdown
A
passes.
game?
Passes for no passes, not
I mean,
not
bro.
passes. Passes.
No
Maybe
idea.
Kanik
No
throws
idea.
Yeah.
He was a
Over unders at 2.5.
under.
absolute beast of a running back in high school. He was trying to
In
convert.
Kansas, that's like the 30th, 5th state of high school football
Well,
players.
would you want him to not be a beast?
I mean,
at running
that's
back?
like saying he was the best running back in Rhode Island. Ooh, wow.
Okay.
Don't sleep on Rhode Island.
Just
They're
saying.
small, but they punch above their weight.
He was trying
Kansas
to
isn't known
learn
for
to
the
play
football.
All right.
linebacker.
All right, so if we get into the
He's a
spring
pure running
and
back.
he is named H-back and he's officially made the move, we're going to have to formulate a bet. We're going to have to formulate a bet with and maybe multiple bets.
Over under 14.
Kanik is like
He's
not-
already doing
He's not
it.
even.
It's not- it's just-
Braden Willis.
it's just every
He's like-
week. It's the Kanik prop bet of the week. We don't even do regular prop bets. It's just Kanik prop bet of the week. The Kanik bet of the week.
And we've been calling for it for 2 years.
Yeah, that's why I'm all in.
We're gonna be
we've
doing the
all
K
been
bow, the
talking
K
about it
bow,
for
the
2
K
years.
bow every week.
They finally listened.
All right. Well, we're going to do that. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming up in the off season. We'll try to get together at least once a month and then a little bit more maybe around spring drills and what's going on. Obviously, going into summer, we're going to have some good stuff. Maybe get some special guests out here. Anything else to cover before we sign off, guys?
It was a long.
It was a long season. I'm glad it's over.
Take
It
a
was so
break.
long.
Miserable.
It was a miserable long season. I want a
Everyone
long,
needs to take a
wonderful
breath.
season.
Everyone needs to
Take a breath, relax. Things are not as bad as they seem, and honestly, they're not as good as they're probably about to seem. So we got to be a little measured
expectations.
in
I
all
can
of
have a
this.
cigar and relax.
That's right. Have a cigar, relax, go to Tobacco Exchange. They'll hook you up for all of that. Until then, Boomer.
Dude,